Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit! Hey RV family, keep it high, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morris, the RV guy reviewing music for the love of music, and I'm back again to bring you another video. And in this one, I'm going to be covering the new Gojira record entitled Fortitude. You know when like a band just kind of busts through and defies your expectations entirely and really has a renaissance of their own sound? Well, I genuinely think that this Gojira record fits that criteria. At this point, I feel like Gojira does not necessarily need that much of an introduction. They have been kicking it since the 1990s, one of the most popular French metal bands, maybe the most popular French metal band that has ever existed, multiple Grammy nominations, a really good discography, and a really fascinating discography to look over considering just how much their sound has evolved from their early days, going from a tech death band with a lot of progressive elements but just generally feeling a lot more generic than they do now, to bringing in all of these different sounds ranging from post-metal to doom metal to sludge metal to classical heavy metal, and just bringing it all together on their 2016 record Magma, which was their last one. I know a lot of people were really down with Magma, and I can understand why, and it was definitely an above average record, but I found myself just wanting a little bit more from them and overall feeling a little bit disappointed stepping away from it. But comparatively speaking, I think a lot of comparisons can be made between Fortitude and some other records to give you an indication of what you're going to get stepping into this. I think that this is sort of like Firepower for Judas Priest, where they brought their sound up to the forefront once again. But I feel like that's sort of a rudimentary type of comparison. I think two other comparisons that I can draw are Emperor of Sand by Mastodon and the Black Album by Metallica, in the way that they took a pre-existing formula and their overall sound and added so much more into the formula while simultaneously bringing it up more so to the mainstream, making it a lot more accessible and digestible to the average metal and rock fan that maybe do not want something super over the top and super extreme. Because comparatively speaking, Fortitude as a record is a lot less harsh, it's a lot less heavy, and there is much more emphasis on melody, on sludge, on doom, on post-metal, and a lot of these tracks feel like they could be played in an arena with so much lively energy in a live format. Now, I don't know if that was something inherently that Gojira was going for or setting out to do, but if it was, they certainly succeeded. And when I say this record isn't as heavy, I don't want to say that they've lost their edge entirely. A lot of these records have these cyclical grooves and some really amazing solos, some great vocal moments, and a lot of dynamics in the range when it comes to the vocals. It really feels like it's birthed out of like the 80s or 90s heavy metal scene specifically, with a lot of influences coming from post-metal and sludge in particular. Some of these riffs are so muddy and so low and so gritty, and you still get those technical elements that they are bringing from their early sound, and I think it makes for this really overall unique flair to their entire sound. This record, if you compare it to other Gojira records in the past, has one of the best starts and first legs. The first 4 or 5 tracks or so are multi-phased, multifaceted, and just really well defined, and showcases all of their strengths in the span of their runtime. Born for One Thing and Amazonia in particular are both wonderful openers to this record, especially Born for One Thing. Especially Born for One Thing. You're getting hit with these Pantera-esque grooving moments, sounds so much like a Pantera, so much like a Sepultura, and I think that is a good segue to say this record also boosts some really groove metal reminiscent riffs. I don't know if that was a conscious thing going into this record, but you can't tell me that the main riff, especially near the midway point of Born for One Thing, doesn't sound like something that would have come from the mind of Dimebag Darrell. There's a major emphasis on refrains in the choruses of these tracks, very chant-like, which funnily enough, there's literally a track on this record called The Chant, and these sort of massive choruses can be a little bit hit or miss. I think that on a track like Hold On, it sort of squanders its potential as it progresses because it takes so long to really build up its own momentum, and while it does boast this driving introduction, this padding percussion that sounds like a war drum going off and sounding in the distance on the hills, it definitely does take a long time to really get into the thick of things, and by the time it does, I feel like it doesn't really build that momentum in such a way that it feels fulfilling and satisfactory. I feel a lot the same way about the track The Chant, which is probably my least favorite track on this record. Despite having a decent runtime to it, it really doesn't feel buff enough or have the same amount of vigor and punch as the rest of the track listing to really pad out the time as much as they do. And I think, if anything, that is the major flaw in the thing that Gojira struggles with on Fortitude, is sometimes they get a little bit too ambitious for their own good by reaching these tracks out and building it up. And while they're trying to build thematically these epic theatrical vibe, the aesthetic falls away a little bit by the time they finally gallop and hit the stride of what they're trying to accomplish on a track. I mean, once again, they're tackling a lot of very important themes. Gojira has always been a very environmentally sound band, and a band that talked about a lot of socio-political and social topics that were very complex, and weaving those into their music has not been something they've been unfamiliar with in the past, and that once again carries over to Fortitude, which is a very environmentally conscious record. And with the current state of affairs, and considering the massive emphasis on environmental activism in this current day and age, it's not surprising that Gojira would pack this track listing out with some very important lessons, important messages, and whether or not you agree with it or not, they definitely put a lot of the heart and soul into it. So it makes those tracks that sort of fall a bit still very enjoyable, because they're really packing in a lot that means something, that has a lot of heart put into it. You can tell they're pouring a lot of who they are and what they believe into it, and that is very respectable whether or not you agree with it or not. And while I respect the fact that there are a lot of dynamic vocal moments on this track listing, I think they also get very ambitious with these larger than life chant-like vocals. I would say that's the other thing that sort of hits me and strikes me a little bit as odd sometimes. Joe is a freakishly good vocalist that can do so much with his range: growls, screams, singing, falsetto, just a lot of different things. And when he has a good production backing him, he sounds amazing. But on certain tracks, when he hits those sort of howling chant-like vocals, especially on these refrains, they can sort of fall a little bit flat, not necessarily in the way that they're delivered, but comparatively speaking with everything that will come before it, there will be a little bit of an imbalance with how it blends in with a verse or a bridge, especially instrumentally, when they'll try to sort of bake something down a little bit and allow it to have a little bit of breathing room. I think if they would have opened up the compositions prior to hitting these bigger moments, it might have been a little bit more hard-hitting. But in terms of this record, just all in all, there's some fantastic audible bass work. There are so many riffs that just blow my mind and are so catchy. I wouldn't say that this is the most boundary pushing or forward thinking Gojira record that has ever come out, but I like it so much more compared to Magma, and I think that they utilized all of their influences that they've been slowly, gradually building up to and putting into their sound over the years in a really smart way, a really clever way. And even though some of the ideas don't necessarily pan out as good as I would like to feel they would, when it comes to this genre and when it comes to Gojira as a band, this is an extremely impressive record. And while it might seem like I point out a lot of flaws and nitpicks in it, it is an extremely tight, rigorous record that really wrings your neck out so hard, and is such a well fleshed out, well crafted record by masters that have the prowess and the expertise to back up all of the ideas that they're trying to do. While I would like to hear them do a little bit more with their influences and maybe draw out things in such a way that feels a little bit more well thought out, I think as a whole, so much more of this record pans out than it doesn't. And for me personally, I'm going to be giving this album an 8 out of 10. And that is a wrap. Have you heard this new Gojira record, Fortitude? If you have, let me know in the comment section below what you thought about it. I would love to discuss this record with you. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morse, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying fair.